Hey folks, Joe Valley here. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of the Quiet Life podcast. Today I have Mr. Pat Yates back with me to be the co-host. Welcome, Pat. How are you?
How we doing, Joe? Good Monday morning. Good way to start the week.
I'm doing all right. I'm so glad that you're co-hosting this podcast with me because you're an actual current e-commerce business owner importing from how many different countries and what are they?
Well, right now they're not getting in from any countries. They're sitting in water. But in general, we come from China and Taiwan is where we mainly have manufactured in the past for my business. And yeah, it's definitely a challenging year for supply chain from many directions.
Yeah. So Pat owns buyhappyfeet.com. For those that don't know already, he was on Shark Tank, did a deal with Robert. You should check it out because the cool thing when I watched it, Pat, was that Robert was out. You reeled him back in. Then he jumped back in and made you an offer that you quickly accepted, and it was pretty fun to watch. Let's say that. So supply chain issues are on everybody's mind. It's a huge problem, and that's why we've got Francois Jaffres from Noviland on with us. He's the director of business development for Noviland. He's also a co-host of the podcast Linked Up Leaders. That's how we connected. He had me on his podcast for the Extrapreneurs Playbook. We're just going to jump right into it, Pat, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely.
And Francois, welcome to the Quiet Life podcast. How are you today?
Hey guys, glad to be here. I'm doing great. Excited, very excited.
It's such a timely interview and timely as in any time in Q4 or Q1, this is a time to talk about it. Maybe any time in 2021. Maybe even into 2022. So let's start with that. Yeah. Prediction, Francois, in the space that you live in, how long are these supply chain issues going to last? Crystal ball.
Ooh, well, anyone that has a crystal ball would make a lot of money right now. But when it comes to just predictions, I don't think that things are going to necessarily get better. I think certain components are going to get easier. Pat, you mentioned that you're having trouble getting products into the US, for example, right? I think a lot of companies are also feeling the exact same issues. Port of Long Beach, even the ports of Savannah, where there's a few vessels backed up. Port of Houston is seeing, delays as well. I think the port congestion is going to start to die down as we get through Chinese New Year. So give them maybe about a month or two to actually start to work through a lot of those containers. I mean, a big issue is understanding how those ports even work. And today in the conversations that we have, it seems like there might be a bit of a lack of education there. It's a lot of companies that think, if I take a container, I just give it back to them and that's the end of story. Understanding how the ports work, number one, is key. But when we start to work more downstream, so the ports might start to get, decongested, but then we have to start thinking about the warehousing, start thinking about the shelves, start thinking about the seasonal products. Where are those going to go? What's going to happen to them if they don't get in time? I think there's going to be larger conversations to have downstream, more into 2022, Q2, Q3. And I mean, I think this is tossing it out of whack for a lot of companies when it comes to resiliency and supply chain. I think that should be a big topic today, too.
Okay. So what you just said and the way you said it just shows your credibility and who you are and what you do. And I wanted to jump into that for that reason. But for those that don't understand your business and your company, can you give us an overview of who you are and what your company does?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm the director of business development here at Noviland. It's just a title. I think a lot of companies just hold titles, particularly startups. Doesn't mean much. I kind of oversee marketing. I help build a lot of the operations, both overseas as well as here in the US, as well as just the general business development. So working with a lot of our larger clients, big box retailers, larger importers as well. And we were founded back in 2016 under an idea that our founders had of making supply chain simple and accessible for all size businesses. So not just the larger businesses that could be resilient, but also SMBs, and particularly upscales for SMBs. Those that are working towards, growing their operations, growing out better supply chain management tools as well. And back in 2016, we ran more of just an agency. It was, hey, come to us with your project. We'll let you know which factories to work with. We'll oversee some of the communications, and we were working to build a platform. So back in 2018, we actually launched the first to market platform for supply chain management as a whole. So it is a all-in-one platform where you just go on there, let us know your project, let us know the key details in your request for quotation, which is different than a request for proposal or just a general proposal or an RFP. Um, and then we oversee, selecting the right factory. So we've onboarded over 5,000 factories in the past 5 years into our network, all medium to large size factories that are willing to take on newer projects. And then we oversee factory communications, quality control management, production oversight, logistics management. Of course, factory relationships. I mean, it's the whole 9 yards from start to finish. And I think this is a very timely time for us. But back in 2016, we did see that there was already that gap. There was already issues with businesses, particularly larger businesses that were encountering supply chain issues, let's say with the trade war, and they didn't know how to effectively manage it. Even with the most experienced people, if you have 5-10 people here in the US, well, what about overseas? What about the conversations that you're going to have with your suppliers? How do you fix the problems quickly? Right. So working nimble, and our team has grown from, I was the third person on the team, part of the founding team, to over 100 employees now. So
holy cow, that's crazy.
It's an exciting time.
Pat, how many manufacturers do you have that you're working with?
We've worked with 4 at any one time in 4 different countries. It's interesting because I think the one thing, there's been so much information out here, Francois, about all the supply chain issues. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think the biggest issue is. You've heard people say China ports are congested, that coming over, that the US ports are congested, that the unions only work till 3, and then there's not enough truckers. And then some people say with COVID and closings in China, this was bound to happen. It was gonna back up regardless, just a matter of when. What's your true view on what the root cause is right now, if you had to estimate the biggest issue?
Yeah, I don't think there's necessarily one root cause. I think this goes to fundamentals. I think a lot of supply chains were built to not be the most resilient, but maybe to be the most optimal at that time. So they're built to, let's say, work with a few manufacturers, to work on certain trade lanes, to work with just certain 3PLs or distribution centers to funnel their products, to only work with, let's say, marketplaces like Amazon to sell their products, and not prepare themselves for omni-channel, not getting the right partners in, and not understanding supply chain as a whole. So again, we were just talking about the ports, but what's going on with 3PLs and carriers, let's say FedEx, UPS, how are their rates affecting your business? Working upstream, what's going on with raw materials? Right across the board, is it better to manufacture in Taiwan? Is it better to manufacture in China? Is it better to manufacture in Vietnam or Mexico? And so I don't think there's one thing that you can pinpoint. And I think that is the issue. I think a lot of this is being siloed into, well, there's a lack of truckers, so I can't get my product. Well, what if you put more truckers on there and the ports are backed up? They can't take empty containers because there's no chassis to put the empty containers or take the containers off of, because there's no port yard storage. So there's no chassis to pick up the full containers to take to your 3PL warehouse, where your 3PL warehouse only works from, let's say, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Well, what happens in those, 10 hours that they're closed? Right. Yeah, I think it's really understanding the fundamentals of supply chain, and that's how you're able to, let's say, address a very specific problem. But I don't think it should be looked at in silos, and a lot of these conversations are just very siloed.
Yeah, and it's too narrow to do that on a broad basis. You've got lots of clients that are dealing with the same issues. Can you give us an example of how your company is helping your clients with these supply chain issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think really it's the conversations that we've started having about 18, 19 months ago, right at the start of the pandemic, when we started to see supply chain issues upstream, right, with manufacturers being delayed, with a lot of our clients telling us, well, we're not sure how much we should be ordering, and us telling them very frankly, what's going to happen if you don't place those orders? Everyone's going to place larger orders at the same time in 6 to 8 months, right? Economy is eventually going to open back up.
When you make that suggestion to them, but they don't have enough cash to place those orders, do you have partner pages, resources where they can go out and get inventory funding or anything like that?
Because it's finding those solutions for them too.
It is finding the solutions for them. Okay. All right. Sorry.
But it is also looking for solutions with their suppliers, let's say, and looking for solutions with their inventory itself. Can their supplier manufacture the product because it's a very non-customized product, where it has customized colors or logos on it, but it's not a super customized product to the market, right? So it's understanding what solutions there are available. Maybe their manufacturer can produce 6 months of inventory and only charge them for 3 and give them net 60 terms for the rest of it. Well, these are like actual conversations that we're having with them. Can they store it at their warehouse? Can they store it at the port warehouses? Can they store it here in the US? And that's where we're opening up more fulfillment centers, distribution centers for them to give them those options.
So you are like the manufacturers that you work with, they're understanding that you're one organization that has lots and lots of clients. And when they deal with you directly, do they do it in a way that maybe will help them win additional businesses as well? So they're going to pay more attention to you as a company that deals with hundreds of clients that may become their clients, or are they going to deal with Pat in a different way because it's just Pat and buyhappyfeet.com? He's one guy, one product versus Noviland that's, one company, hundreds of products. Is there a strength in numbers with you and that communication that gets you better terms, let's say, than Pat would be able to get individually?
100%. So we do vouch for our clients, and that's why we go through a thorough vetting process even of our clients. When they upload, let's say they create an account today, they can't act, we won't work on any of their projects until we understand their business, until we understand what are they expecting to get out of this? What are their problems that they need solved? And when we approach the factories and say, hey, we have Pat that are producing, let's say they need 100,000 of this type of slipper a month, and Joe needs something in about 6 months, we can work with their production schedule and say, well, where can we prioritize the different orders, and how should we prioritize them into your production schedule? How can we work out those payment terms? They're both ordering a decent sized quantity. They've been clients of us for, let's say, a year, 2 years. What sort of payment terms can we give both of them? Because they give us those payment terms and we can give you those payment terms at the end of the day. So negotiations do tend to be a lot easier, and even pricing at the end of the day. If we're able to bring them more clients, they will end up giving us better pricing. One, because we're easier to work with. We have boots on the ground that can actually communicate and streamline the process itself. But two, when it comes to payments, we can actually simplify a lot of those payments through our portal and paying them, let's say, in lump sums, or pay them ahead of time. And then we'll collect the funds from you later on because we can vouch for you.
Francois, let me ask another question. Let's say that someone gets an order, they develop a product, they ship it out of China, it gets in there and it's let's say at port, but then there are no trucks. Talk a little bit about, do you all do full service help to be able to help people? For instance, I have situations where we transload into trailers to get them straight over versus on the rail to save time. Super expensive, but do you have options that you give clients to be able to get things in different manners once they hit the United States to help with that timing issue that they're probably dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, that's a similar process that I think a lot of companies are trying to go to right now, trying to transload them at the ports themselves, right, nearby warehouses even. It's a solution that we're able to provide on a one-on-one basis. It's not and the reason that, for example, you go to our portal or you go to our platform and it's not just click a button and you'll receive this service is because it's tailored to everyone's supply chain, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you're working with your marketing team and you said, I have a campaign in 6 months, so it's not a top priority to me. And we have 20 trailers that we can actually book in that week. Well, we're not going to probably give you one of those trailers immediately. We'll let it sit at the port for a little bit, or
Gotcha.
We'll work with you to see, hey, can you store it at one of our other warehouses for a short bit until we have more trailers to get to you? A lot of that was actually based more upstream, so into China. When we have those conversations with suppliers, it's, hey, can you store these items for XYZ customer for 3 months, and we'll pay you in 3 months for that product. And they know that we're good for it because we've been working with them for years, and we're establishing those relationships with them. So when it comes to that specific solution, yeah, it can definitely be done. It's just conversations. It's conversations that honestly are had too late, and that's the issue. It's, hey, I'm looking for a new trucker, I'm looking for a new company, or I'm going to book online, and it's just a one-click solution. Well, it doesn't really work that way.
First of all, let me ask you. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
It sounds like it's almost too late for people to solve the problem. If their product is stuck on a ship somewhere, there's not a whole lot that you're going to be able to do to solve that. But people are feeling pain now, and they're understanding the benefit of planning, right? Everybody hates exit planning, but once they get into it, they realize they should have done it 12 months ago because they would get more value for their business. I think it's the same with what you do. How important is it for somebody to think in advance? Like if they want to work with you, what are the benefits going to be? How long should they be thinking about it or discussing it with you? And how important are the relationships that you have with suppliers and manufacturers to help reduce the freight charges, to reduce cost of goods sold, to get better terms and things of that nature? That was a lot in one question. Let's start with relationships. How important are the relationships that you have with your suppliers, manufacturers, freight forward carriers and things of that nature?
I think they're extremely important. I don't think they're just important for us, but I think they're important for every business across the board. And I think effectively managing those relationships are what a lot of companies struggle with. A lot of times it tends to be you only reach out to them if there's a problem or if you want something from them. It's not necessarily to check in and say, hey, just how are you doing? These are my plans for the next 6 months. Pat, you had something?
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
And so understanding, what do our clients need, and really relaying these to our partners, to our freight forwarders, to directly to Costco, let's say, for we need 30 containers because we have 12 clients that are utilizing this much container space per month. Well, we'll lock in those contracts. We'll be able to get better rates with them at the end of the day, and we can pass on those better rates to our clients. Understanding, the relationship both ways, not just with the suppliers. So let's say the freight forwarders, the shipping carriers, the manufacturers, but also with the customers, with the clients that we have is very important. And understanding their forecasts, understanding their marketing plans, understanding the struggles that they have so we can effectively pass on those communications is just as important.
I do have a question, Francois. One thing that I was really miffed about, and a lot of people that are, other business owners that have done import for decades, for that matter, that you see container costs go from 5,000 to 20,000 in like a week. I know that a lot of people speculated, and some people called it opportunistic. Some people looked at the United States administration, which a lot of things go into this. Tell me what your thought is on why that happened that quickly, because this is going to become a real financial decision for a lot of people that are going to be selling businesses through Quiet Light in 2022, how they handle this increase if it goes back down. So I'm curious to hear what you think started that, and if you think it will slow in the future months coming up.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that we live in a capitalist society, right? When they see the demand start to skyrocket, and they're going to jump on those opportunities. Everyone's in this to make money at the end of the day. It all comes down to the relationships that you have with, let's say, the freight forwarders, with the carriers, with the manufacturers, to get better rates, to maybe secure a better cargo space for you. But at the end of the day, the pricing itself is not something that can easily be manipulated, right? A lot of times that we see new clients that we have come to us with the problem specifically of what you're talking about. Hey, this is $20,000. I need it for cheaper. A lot of times that's the wrong conversation to have. It's, hey, this is $20,000, but I need my product here in 3 months. Otherwise, I'm going to be out of stock, or I can't run certain marketing campaigns, or I can't take over certain market share because my competitors are also suffering. Everyone's feeling the same pains, right? So it's, I think, looking at it from a different perspective. Now, when we talk specifically about those rates being $20,000, are we having the conversation about which ports are the best ones to go to? Are we having conversations about, it's what is your priority? Is it getting that inventory first, or is it to get the cheapest price? Now, if it's to get the cheapest price, we can probably wait, or we can try to find better routes for you. That's going to take longer and get you that cargo, maybe a few $1,000s cheaper. It's going to take longer, 100%. Or we can spread out your shipments in LCL shipments and try to find cheaper, smaller freight forwarders that can handle those. But if you need your inventory, and if you're actually planning to scale up, then cost should be, second thought almost. You need to have inventory to sell. Otherwise, you're going to go under with that product line.
That's true. But in this case, playing devil's advocate, for someone that carries large products like me, I can only get 8,000 a container. A $15,000 increase is $2 a unit. That is a massive increase for some people. Not your fault. What I'm trying to dive into is if that is going to go away from 20 closer to the 5, or was it just a reset to get this at a higher price? Because you talk about competitive, which is great, but no one is selling them off cheap, which some people would eventually do to get business. So do you see that going into the first and second quarter, probably maybe normalizing a little bit?
I think so. I don't think $20,000 is the new normal by any means, but I think we are going to have a new normal. Now, no one's going to have the crystal ball that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast of where is this exactly going to go? Is it going to normalize at 10,000? Is it going to normalize at 15,000? I highly doubt it's going to normalize at 20,000. It's unsustainable. It's unsustainable for the suppliers. It's unsustainable for the consumers, right? We're only going to be willing to pay so much more for certain products at the end of the day. And so I think everyone's going to realize that freight forwarders or shipping carriers at a certain point, they're going to have the conversation of let's start to de-escalate some of these issues. And it's going back to 2000, the beginning of the pandemic. So 2000, end of 2019, beginning of 2020. What conversation were the carriers having? Well, they were having the conversations based on the consumer standpoint, right? The brands and the big box retailers were saying, we're not going to order a lot, so you should limit down how many containers you're putting out there because we don't think our consumers are going to be buying more. Well, what did we see happen? The opposite. Now that they limited how many boats are on the water that can actually take in containers, that demand is starting to escalate, but also the number of containers that they have out need to start to rise little by little. So it's a game of catch up. And when we talk about the price, maybe we'll see it normalize somewhere around $10,000, $12,000, hopefully not more than that. But I think 2022 is still going to be an elevated cost across the board.
That's still a 5-time increase in shipping container costs, though, right? If it was at an average of 2, you're talking about $10,000.
Well, and here's another thing. When I have these conversations, a lot of times we need to measure apples to apples. We need to make sure that we're talking about from the manufacturer to the place that it's being delivered and not just a port to port cost. Because a lot of times we have conversations with clients that say, hey, I'm looking at it on Freightos or anywhere else, and they see $14,000. They're like, I want it for $14,000. But what they don't realize is, well, let's talk about demurrage and drayage from the port to the actual warehouse itself. How much do those trailers cost? How much are truckers charging? Can they return the container on time? If not, we're talking about thousands of dollars potentially a week and just having your container sit there because they can't deliver it back. So I think looking at it from the whole picture and not just saying, hey, this one aspect needs to come down. It's kind of the concept of free shipping, right? We talk about free shipping across the board. We say, hey, this mug is $10, but free shipping. Or you could say it's $8 with $2 shipping. At the end of the day, the consumer's still eating that cost. The brands and the big box retailers, they're still eating those costs. It's just a matter of where are they eating those costs.
So Pat, in your situation, your cost of goods sold because of the freight, the container cost has gone up by $2 a unit. Are you jacking your price up by $2 a unit?
I personally did not move our prices. We've had very good success with our customer base in many, many years. We didn't move it at all. If anything, we discounted more to help with the inflation in the United States. So it's going to be a loss. I pretty much know that it's going to be, tens of thousands of units times a couple of bucks, but, hopefully it normalizes. Our customers are much more important than that. So.
That's why you haven't talked about your fulfillment as part of what your services are. Can you touch on that a little bit? It's part of what you provide to your clients, I think. Yes. Yeah.
But Pat, like out of curiosity, the cost itself, because this is a conversation that we're also having every day. Why not bring up this cost by a few dollars and have the loyal customers that you have and explaining to them, hey, this is what's going on. And this is why we need to increase some of our costs.
I can tell you that I could give that explanation. I could put a video on my website and salespeople are going to call and complain. It doesn't matter anything that goes on. It's difficult to pass any kind of cost along to a consumer, especially in this year. It could have been years where you would. And I believe all these price changes are going to be fixed in. People that are talking about inflationary increases in consumer products, they're going to stay. A lot of it has to do with the amount of money they're paying people in the United States with new wages and things like that. There's a lot of reasons, but we just felt like that we want to do a better job servicing the customer. It's servicing the customer first and have a good price on a fun product that we have. Could I squeeze another dollar out? Yeah, but it just didn't seem right in this season. And I think that if it continues, we'll have no choice, obviously, but right now we just don't want to do that.
Now, one thing to note here, Francois, is that Pat's not in a normal situation as an entrepreneur. Right. He owns Happy Feet. He's got family running it. It's not paying his mortgage and, putting food on his table necessarily. It's there. I think, Pat, now as a real big bonus because your role at Quiet Light is, the income that one of them is irrelevant, right? Because you've got income at Quiet Light that is generating enough to pay you well. You're not in a situation where you have to increase prices because you're living off of the business. Is that a good assessment, Pat?
I would think it's a good assessment. I'm in a position that some people are not in to be able to move it. My margins are really high to start with. So I feel comfortable that absorbing a little bit was the right decision this year. I don't know that it would be in the future, but yes, that's 100% the case. So we don't concentrate on that portion a little bit and we can eat some of it. But my plan, so the people out there that are Quiet Light that understand businesses, where I'm starting to understand this, is I'm accounting for it on a different line versus landed cost of goods sold. I'm normalizing it against the normal prices, looking at the uptick and putting it on another line. And that could be something, if it goes down, that there could be potentially add backs for people that spent that money in reverse. So I'm actually looking at it from a practical standpoint alone, as well as the other businesses I'm looking at, as to whether something will change.
Very
but
smart.
We felt it was better just to keep the pricing the same for our customers who come in every year.
Where are you putting that in your P&L, and what are you labeling it?
I'm putting on a freight and duty import increase line, and then I'm going to go back and allocate it against the unit cost of what we imported for the actual taxes. But I'm going to keep it on a line that I know exactly and isolate what that increase was for what period of time.
So in theory, folks, if Pat were to sell his business in Q3 of 2022, and the costs have come back down, or down to a lower level, Francois, let's say they came down to 10,000 instead of 20,000 that he's paying. He's got that data right there in the P&L, and he can do an add back for that increase of that 10,000. Let's say it normalizes at 10,000, but he made let's say he's got 30 container ships where he had an increase. I need to do better math here. 10 containers where he paid an extra $10,000. That's an add back, right, on that P&L. And that's why he's keeping that line separate. So you can easily identify it, make an adjustment to an add back schedule. And if it's a difference of $100,000 in terms of an add back, and he sells his business for 5 times, that's $500,000 added to the list price of the business. That's really complicated, and I'm sorry for that. Francois, fulfillment center, you got 1 million square feet. Is this right?
Yeah, that's what we're shooting towards in the next few weeks. Actually, we're getting finished building up another one in just north of Atlanta. That's going to add another 280,000 square feet of fulfillment space. And we're working closely actually with the Port of Savannah. And that's one. I mean, when it comes to fulfillment and 3PLs, I think we've seen a lot of pop-ups, right, when it comes to just the pandemic, because everyone's looking for new 3PLs. It's important to know who you're working with. It's important to know what resources they have. We're, for example, working with the Port of Savannah to actually understand the allocation that could come to our space, and getting the containers back to them, and working on rates and working on timing. And they tell us, for example, what their KPIs are. How quickly can they actually unload a lot of these containers? And we work that into our model of, okay, when it comes to, let's say, drayage, should we be allocating 3 days of the container sitting in your yard? Well, that has to be factored into the cost. A lot of the pop-ups nowadays, I think, are not necessarily opportunistic, but I think they are not seeing the whole operational picture. And I think we will start to see the cost of 3PLs rise over the next few years. The cost of real estate by itself for 3PLs are skyrocketing. Right. I mean, we're putting out bids for different warehouses, and they're coming in way over asking price, stuff that just seems abnormal. But at the end of the day, I think they're going to start to increase the prices. I think, and this is where it gets complex. And I was asking you those questions, Pat, about, you not raising those prices to the consumers, is because I think the trickle effect of all of these issues with the upstream supply chain through the downstream supply chain are going to cause those costs to rise naturally. And I think, for example, UPS and FedEx for oversized items, they're increasing the cost by like 16%. I think on January 1st, they're increasing their standard rates by about 6%. Mm-hmm. And so, when you understand all these operational costs and factor those into your pricing, it's like, well, me as a consumer, if I'm seeing that everyone else is starting to increase their price, I'm probably willing to pay a little bit more for that product. Especially with the conversation of inflation going around the board. It's how bad do I need slippers? And I need slippers pretty damn bad right now. So,
yes, you do.
I do. So I'll probably get some after this. But But yeah, I mean, 3PLs, it's 3PLs and fulfillment. I think it's finding the right partner for your business and understanding your business at the end of the day. What are you trying to do? Are you just selling on Shopify? Are you just selling on Amazon? Are you planning to do both? Are you planning to go into Walmart or planning to go into Wayfair with furniture or overstock with furniture or whatever the case is, and having those conversations with your 3PL? We tackle that in a very similar fashion that we do to sourcing, in the fact that we just learn everything about your business first. Where do you plan to be in the next year or two? And then we can start working together. Otherwise, it's just not a good fit.
That makes sense. Francois, there's a lot of people out there that may not understand, if they're new entrepreneurs or starting to build products or getting a business to market now, for that matter, that don't really understand what a 3PL is. And I understand it. Maybe you can tell them a little bit about how you're set up, maybe how small someone can be. I don't know if you do drop ship via email, if it's all via EDI, if you send over batches and people and you download and ship them. Tell them a little bit about the flexibility if they're trying to start a company, what they can do, coming into your warehousing.
Yeah, I mean, we typically work with more established businesses for a 3PL. Typically, if you're shipping out anywhere between 3 and 500 units per week at least, we'll take you on as a 3PL client. Now, if you're using us for sourcing, all of it comes. You're able to use our 3PL no matter what your size is, and our sourcing size is somewhere around at least $10,000 for an initial project, and that's also mostly because medium to large size factories don't tend to look at a project unless it's at least $10,000. And so I guess when it comes to sizing, shipping out at least 300 to 500 units per week, the more the better. You get better rates at the end of the day. And for sourcing, somewhere around $10,000 for an initial project at least. Depends how customized. Now, someone coming right out of the gate that's just starting, to get their feet wet with product development, for example, I think it gets trickier because we do have to educate them a bit more. For example, ideas and creations that seem very simple. It's, let's say, taking this bottle and adding a bigger handle to it because they think that, hand sizes are a little bit bigger. They might think that's a very simple and easy change to do because the manufacturer already makes it, but then we have to have the conversations of molding and tooling, right? And who owns that? How much is that going to cost? How much do you have to produce per year for that to even make sense?
Does Noviland have access to industrial designers to make those changes?
Not at this time.
No. Okay. So
No.
do you outsource that to Gemba or Inventus or something like that? Or does the product owner have to come with the design changes already?
Yeah, a lot of our product owners, we will try to work with them if they're working with, let's say, a Fiverr artist or an in-house product designer. I know Gemba does offer that level. We don't at this time.
Inventus does down here in Charlotte as well. They've been around for 20 plus years. Inventus, yeah.
Okay, and they handle the upstream supply chain as well, the manufacturing, and
they can do some of that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You can. Yeah. They can do individual projects or all in one, just like Gemba does. They're both good companies, good people behind them as well.
Yeah. I heard Gemba when I was on Global Sources a few days ago. They seem like an awesome company. And a lot of, I got some questions from some of the people in the company. Why are you friendly with a lot of our competitors? Well, I think there's enough space to innovate here in the supply chain. I think that's the most important part. Innovation and changing the way that supply chain solutions are looked at. Even they're not just an added cost, but they're a value add to your business. Finding the right partners, I think, is extremely important, especially if you're looking to exit your business. If you're looking to scale in the next 12 to 24 months, then you should be looking at the right partners, not trying to do everything yourself. It's a lot to manage at the end of the day.
So what kind of clients do you guys work best with? Is there any particular niche or product size or category?
Yeah, anything I would say that's non-consumable. So no supplements, no food products, anything that might go through the FDA also, we're not very strong with. When it comes to the size of the company, I think if they at least have 5 to 10 product lines or SKUs, I would say, they're typically a great client for us. Anything more than that, even better. They typically have a lot more benefits of using our platform, sort of this all-in-one system. Less than that, we will take on. It's not that we won't. It's just that the projects do tend to take longer, first of all, because there is a lot more education that come into them, right? So for example, if you're designing new slippers, you have to typically come with a design pack. and let us know, hey, these are how the actual slippers need to be made. Unless you're just sourcing something off the shelf, then we're also capable of doing that. Just keeping in mind that, project size somewhere around $10,000 initially is typically key.
That's why I used to watch. So if you took any product, let's say it's a widget, someone is sitting in their office saying, I've invented this widget. I want to make it. I want to distribute it. I used to watch Roadrunner. So let's use an anvil as an example. Somebody wants to make a really good anvil and they want to bring it to the United States. They don't know how to start to make it, import it, or get it on the shelves. And all they want to do is build a site and sell it. You can help start to finish, provided the product fits and the volume is there, that they can help start to finish, get their entire supply chain set up. Is that basically what your model is if someone out there is looking to do that?
If they have product design, as long as they have product design for the anvil itself, then yes, we 100% can. We don't work on the product design yet. It's something that we might be looking into in a few years. It's just the majority of our clients tend to work better with their own product designers and industrial designers to also look at the market. For example, if it's a child's product, what certifications do you need both in the US and in the EU and in Australia? It's operations that we're not the strongest at. And so we don't want to really put our hand in something that we're not extremely strong in. As soon as you have your product design and everything that goes into an RFQ or a request for a quote, let's say quantities, target price point, product specifications, potential materials that you might want to use, quantities, where they'll be distributed, what sort of certifications you might need. Coming to us with that is essentially going to any other supplier and just saying, hey, this is what we need. If you're already talking to a supplier, for example, getting another quote on that doesn't hurt and it's free. So it's always worth just looking at diversifying your portfolio of potential suppliers.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's critical especially if they know they're competing against other suppliers, they may be a little bit more aggressive in their prices or terms, I would think, that allows you to buy more inventory and not run out and end up paying a higher cost because rates have gone up.
And all that comes with scale.
Yeah, it all comes with scale. Exactly. How important, last question in terms of the relationships individually, historically, I've always heard the best way to get the best deal is to go to China and have dinner and drinks, get to know them and drink and then ask for what you want. Do you guys have boots on the ground over in China, Taiwan, things of this nature? Or do you just have these relationships and you wield a big sword because you've got so many clients?
Yeah, we've got over, at this point, I want to say about 65, 70 boots on the ground overseas, in China specifically, mainland China. Is where we have all of our manufacturers. Now, we do have another office in Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam. Setting up the supply chain there, it's proving to be a lot more difficult than one might think. A lot of times you think, oh, it's China, Vietnam's right there. They have very similar supply chains. Well, you have to look at the infrastructure. You have to look at their raw material suppliers. You have to look at the relationships they have with China at that time. A lot of it even is political. It's understanding the politics behind what's going on, right? So we do have a lot of boots on the ground. They do form new relationships with suppliers every week. But we do have this, essentially this network of over 4,000, 5,000 manufacturers, factories that you can actually work with. And we handle all the communications with them for you. So it's just a matter of, hey, I need this. And this is what's part of the project. This is how many I need. We'll get you a quote. Awesome.
Well, Pat, you have any more questions? I think I'm all out of the questions for this podcast. I think it's timely, necessary. I think the clients that are out there listening to this podcast that are e-commerce business owners, a great resource for you is Noviland, and getting a quote and seeing what it's like, making sure you've got a partner on your side to get better prices, better coordination, better planning, better relationships, diversification, things of that nature. Pat, you got any last thoughts?
No, I 100% agree with what Francois says. I think that those relationships are really, really big and it can help. I think sometimes in the short period of time, everyone had to react when all this stuff came up this year was going to be difficult. The prices have been difficult. The people really getting hurt are the small businesses. The bigger companies obviously have contracts that they're booked out, but hopefully next year it normalizes a little bit. And Francois, you got a great business model, and being able to take people from start to finish in the supply chain is an amazing thing. And I wish you the best with it.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think it's totally necessary because some of us, actually most of us as entrepreneurs, we're good at getting started. We can see the finish. It's all the stuff in between that we get challenged with, and that's the detail-oriented stuff, and that's what Noviland does. So, Francois, I'm excited that you guys are doing what you do and that we've connected both through your podcast and ours now. Can you tell the audience the best way to find you, to reach you and connect with you?
Yeah, if you want to ask any questions personally, my LinkedIn's always available. There are actually not that many Francois Jaffres out there.
How do you spell their last name? Jaffres, actually, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So if you look me up on LinkedIn, I should be the first one to pop up. Chat me, connect with me. I'd love to talk all things supply chain. So there's no single problem that I probably haven't heard over the past 6 years. But aside from that, if you want to get started, start getting quotes, you can talk to our sales team. If you want, just go to noviland.com. You can create an account. It's completely free to use and submit a request for a quote. Again, we are going to have to get on that call. It's no matter your size, we hop on the call no matter what, for sourcing, for 3PL, for logistics, whatever your need might be. We have to understand your needs. Anyone that offers a one-click solution, I think is going to be very tricky, especially right now. So yeah, I would just come prepared. Let us know your problems and we'll let you know what solutions we could find for you.
All right, we'll put the LinkedIn profile in the show notes, and Noviland is noviland.com. Francois, thanks for joining us on this episode of the Quiet Light Podcast.
Thank you, guys.